Hello, everyone. My name is John Williams. I'm the Chief Executive of the Institute of Leadership and Management, and I welcome you to our Leadership at the Edge on LinkedIn Live. So where you can join me, where we'll be sharing ideas across the community of leadership practice in every context, everywhere. Each month, I'm joined by senior leaders from around the world to discuss their real-life experiences, to challenge some outdated leadership practices, and to offer a fresh take on the issues that today's leaders face. In this episode, we'll be discussing the always absorbing topic of human behavior, and I am privileged to have as my guest psychology expert, Dr. Maria Katsarou-Makin. Maria has over 20 years of practical experience with a doctorate in leadership psychology and a proven background in human resources, psychology, and leadership. Maria is the founder of the Leadership Psychology Institute, where she's done some groundbreaking work actually into measuring trust, and is also the author of this book, Group Dynamics, which we'll come back to in just a second. Maria believes that understanding human behavior is key to understanding why we think the way we do, and most importantly, why we feel the way we do. So who better to equip us with the tools to understand who we really are? Maria, welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, John. It's fantastic to be back and to have this opportunity to discuss it's actually, I'm really, really glad you said human behavior, because that's what psychology is. Because psychology can be scary sometimes, but it's actually human behavior. So thank you.
Oh no, psychology certainly is a scary word when I hear it. Definitely.
Yeah.
So, but I think I suppose we could start actually with your book, which was just launched just yesterday. Actually, and one of the things that's actually emphasized, I think, quite a lot in the book is this principle of psychological safety, which, of course, we hear an awful lot about at the moment for quite good reason. And I just wondered if we could explore a little bit about the impact of psychological safety on human behavior in organizations.
Absolutely, yes. And it's interesting to distinguish it from trust as well, because sometimes the terms are used interchangeably, but they're actually two different things. Trust is between two people, so I trust you, you trust me, while psychological safety is actually an umbrella. And I think it's important to emphasize that psychological safety is actually about performance. So
right.
Excuse me, because I just lost you.
Oh, am I back?
Can you see me still?
Sorry. We can see you.
Yep. Sorry about that. Apologies, everybody. My computer just decided to reload something random. So
this is computers all over. There's technology for us.
Yeah. So apologies for the blip. So I was saying that psychological safety is actually about performance.
Yep.
And it's important to remember that psychological safety is not about being nice. It's not about, being touchy-feely. It's not about having a consensus. It's not about not having conflict. On the contrary, organizations that have cultures that have psychological safety, they actually have much more constructive conversations. They can challenge. There is permission to make mistakes, because mistakes then promote innovation and so on. So it's really, really important. So it's not something, as I said, touchy-feely. It's actually about performance.
So in a sense, then, psychological safety is a sort of, I suppose, a climate of permission. Would it be fair to say that?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, I like the word permission. It's permission to be vulnerable, permission. So if you are my boss, is about the ability for me to come and say, hey, John, you know what? I'm not feeling great today. Could you help me? Or I don't know this. The ability to say, I don't know, and ask for help and support.
Right. Yeah. Very interesting, because if we think about permission, it's something that obviously we give to other people. Sometimes we give to ourselves. There's also, I guess, a need to encourage people to accept the permission they are given to be vulnerable, to be themselves. How does that work? Do you think that's easy to do in an organization?
It's not. It's easier said than done, and you know, things that we sometimes unintentionally say, and things I've definitely grown up with this sentence, and it might be familiar to you or to the audience. Don't bring me problems, only solutions. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a fantastic sentence. One would think, oh, it's very motivational, very empowering. But if you think about it, what I'm actually telling the person is, don't tell me you can't do this. So
Right.
unintentionally, I'm contributing to them not feeling psychologically safe. So
Mhm.
many things that we have grown up with that used to be the thing in management or leadership actually might not be the best way to to continue to do or say.
Yeah, interesting. And that in a way brings us back to the other word that you used early on, which is about trust.
Yes.
Because we do, I guess, if, as you say, trust is between two people, and psychological safety is this climate, this context. Actually, we do need, even within a psychologically safe arena, we do need to bring trust with us, really.
Definitely.
Yeah. And do you think trust, I've often thought of trust as being a sort of reciprocal thing. I need to give trust before, in a sense, before I can be trusted. Do you think that that's actually, how it
Yes.
works?
Definitely. And also that there's another important point about what we define as trust, because it's one of those umbrella statements, and everybody would have a different definition. And there are many, loads of definitions. There are actually a zillion definitions as there are writers about the subject. So on an organizational level, it's important for the team or the organization to define trust and what it means to them, and also have behavioral descriptions of what that means, so that everybody has the same language. Because yes, it is reciprocal, as you said. One definition that I find really interesting and I often use is a researcher has distinguished between cognitive trust and affective trust. So
Okay.
cognitive trust is, if you are my boss, I trust your capabilities. I trust that you know what you're doing and you will give me the right advice. So that's cognitive.
Yep.
Affective trust has to do with me feeling okay and safe to come to you and say, you know what, I had a hard time last night at home. This is going on, and share with you a bit more about my personal situation. The second type of trust is the one that will bring us closer together rather than, I mean, the first is great.
Ah.
And
Yep. Yep.
usually organizations do have the first, but usually they don't have the second type of trust, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does make sense because in a way, if we accept somebody in a leadership position, I'll say above us, but you know what I mean. It's somebody in
Yeah,
a position of being our
yeah,
leader. We sort of trust them implicitly to have the competencies and capabilities to do that. So that cognitive trust,
yeah,
it's almost inherent in some positions and some hierarchies. The
yeah.
other bit, it requires us to make an effort to
Hmm.
actually not just to express our vulnerability, to be possessed of that effective trust. The other
Exactly.
person actually needs to give us permission to do that, of course.
Exactly. And to add to what you just said, not only we have that, because if anybody who is sort of, if we perceive somebody higher than us, there's also something else that it takes place, which is attribution. We attribute
Okay.
things to them,
Yep.
even if they haven't said or done anything, only because of certain traits or expectations or whatever. We just attribute things to them.
Yep.
And that's when, again, things can go wrong, because we don't sit down and have a conversation about the expectations and the assumptions that I may have made about my new boss, or how he or she might be expecting me to communicate. And I haven't done that. It's a very, very simple conversation, but I haven't taken the time to do that. And I'm just expecting. And that comes out, of course, when things go wrong.
Yep. Yep.
Oh,
And
I thought that.
yeah, I thought, yes, that's what I did. And interesting because I remember coming across years ago this concept of psychological contract, and
Mm,
somebody explained it to me as the implicit contract that, say, an employee has with their employer. And
Exactly.
basically, it's their expectations of how the employer will behave. The big challenge for the employer, and this, I guess, is particularly relevant to somebody who's leading a team, the big challenge is that that individual who holds the psychological contract, the employer doesn't know what's in it.
Exactly.
It's in the mind of the individual. So,
Absolutely.
and so is it? Do you think it's ever possible to really grasp the psychological contract that one's team members might have?
Yeah, but it's not. We have to make an effort. This we need to have the conversation. So very often I coach people who are are in a transition from one role to the other, and one
Yep.
of the first things I say, which is not very coaching, is much more directive, if you like, is to have that conversation. What is the expectation? What are the assumptions? What are they expecting from you? What are you expecting? And what have you assumed about them?
Right.
It sounds very trivial and very simple, but for whatever reason, we just don't have that conversation. But so it is, to answer your question, it is possible, but we just need to invest time.
Some of it is about language as well, I think, possibly. I remember one of my friends saying to me when we talked about assumptions, and he used the phrase "making things up." So he said,
Okay,
if I assume something about you, he said, that means I'm making this up about you. And it was
correct.
an interesting twist of the language, because it means
Yes,
I've invented something.
yes, yes,
I assume a characteristic or a competency in you. It means I've made it up in my mind, and
exactly. And
I might not have any evidence.
no, that is very true, and that's biology. Everybody's brain, or neuroscience, if we want the more
Yep.
fancy term. That's how everybody's brain works. So if we don't have the information, we make it up. And unfortunately, because we have a huge negative cognitive bias, sometimes we make up something negative.
Right.
They
Right. Okay.
so if you see me on the corridor and you don't talk to me, I might think, oh, he doesn't like me, instead of me thinking, oh, probably John was very busy and he was thinking about his next podcast, and that's why he didn't talk to me. So
Right.
yeah,
They're
that's
interesting.
why it's important to articulate.
Yeah, and in a way, because this we bring this back to teams and how teams
Mm,
work, which I know is a specialization, obviously, of yours. It almost requires us to be continually communicating
yes,
within a team. Is
yes.
that practical or practicable, do you think? Is that
Uh,
easily done?
it's practical. It's a very interesting question. It does take time. I believe it is mandatory that it does take place, because without that, it's the team won't be effective, because it's about what's happening within the team, and that again takes me back to what we were discussing the other day about high performance teams. It's not
Right.
a state you just achieve. You need to be working at that all the time. You may be high performing team on one case study, the next day you might not be high performing. It's not a state. You really need to be doing the work all the time.
This is quite demanding, isn't it? Because it means that because context
Mm.
changes all the time, it
Yes,
means that we both as team leaders and I know something I know, which is another passion of yours, followers, we
yeah,
need to be thinking all the time about the context in which we're operating.
yes. And
Yeah,
you just use the key word there, thinking.
right.
Leadership is a reflective practice. It's not about us doing stuff on other people. It's about reflecting what's going on, what's happening. And it's if there were one thing I would say we need to be doing more is reflecting. And what I mean by that, I know I'm not the appropriate person to use an athletic example, but the basketball team or the football team, they
Yep.
play. When the game is going on, the coach just tells them what to do. When the game is over, they go, backstage or wherever they go to have a shower and so on, and then
Yep.
they sit and watch the match. That's the reflection time. So what went wrong? What could have we
Right.
done better?
Right.
What's the competition, the opponent doing? That's that's where we learn. And the
Yeah.
higher up we are, the more we need to do of that, actually. Yeah.
Interesting, because I know in agility, in business agility, there's a practice around retrospectives. So at the end of, not just at the end of a project, but the end of every sprint, they will look at what's our retrospective view of what just happened over that
Exactly.
period and things. Yeah.
Yes.
Thinking about that from a team perspective, I guess we come back to this idea of having permission to be vulnerable and stuff, because a retrospective isn't just, well, how did, what could we have done better? Actually, it's quite a challenging conversation to have if we're talking about, well, that didn't work the way we expected.
Exactly.
And some people will feel very, very vulnerable. How do we as leaders, how do we manage that kind of conversation with the whole team?
Yeah. There are two things here. First of all, it's important to remember that the responsibility of the functioning of the team doesn't just fall on the leader. So it falls on everybody. So if there are 9 members in a team, they all have 1/9 of the responsibility of the functioning of the team.
Right.
So when we work with teams, that's one of the things we emphasize, so that everybody takes responsibility, not just the leader or HR, which is usually the other, you do it. And then the other thing is we try and teach them. I don't like the word teach them, but support them in learning how to distinguish the task from the process. The task is what we are doing.
Yeah.
The process has to do with how. So functioning, effective teams are very good at looking at their process. In other words, stepping back and looking at how we're doing things. And does that make,
Yeah, and because that's a bit sort of, step back and see the wood rather than just look at the trees, as it were.
Yeah.
And an interesting point actually from Mario in the comments, who's just mentioned, picking up on what you were saying, actually, reflection is an important part of the learning process, allowing the team to identify how to improve. It's aligned to the concept of deliberate practice. And that picks up what you said about, actually, this is a behavior. Reflection is a behavior. Is that something that can be, I'll use the word taught, but at least encouraged or uncovered in individuals?
Yes, and I like how Mario phrased it. He used the word deliberate, because that's what it is. It's a skill. And again, it's one of, in my opinion, it's a mandatory skill for a leader to be able to read what's happening within a system. When I use the word system here, I mean a group or a team of people. So it's definitely something that can be taught, and there are frameworks that teach you that, because it's observable behavior.
Right. Now, interesting the use of the word system there to mean the team or the group or what's, because often when we think about a system, we think of something that happens automatically, or a set of rules and parameters and things like this. Tell me why you use the word system to describe the team.
I will, thank you. And I think it's something you mentioned the other day as well. We are not in a vacuum. As individuals, we are always part of something else, whether it's our family, whether it's the gym we go, whether it's some other club we might be members, our department, that's another system, the whole organization is another system, and it is always affected by external influences. So that's the idea of the system. So what I do is always affected by what is happening around me. So that's why I use the word system. So, and the first system we are born into is our family. And even children who are unfortunate and are not born in a family but in an institute, they're part of that system.
Right. Okay. So
there's always, we're never in a vacuum.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, this is interesting, because often when we think about a system in that sort of esoteric sense, a system can either work or not work. If it doesn't work, we think, well, actually, we can fix it. If we think about the system as a team or a group, actually, it's not something that can be fixed from outside. And I know that one of the things that you emphasize quite strongly is the need for the system, the team, to fix
Exactly.
itself.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
and what does that take?
It takes for the team,
Hmm.
all of them, not just the leader, to do the hard work.
Ah,
Yeah, and
okay.
sometimes it's, we can bring an army of gurus and professionals. If the team doesn't want to change, they just won't change, and it will be just a nice day away. But
Hmm.
the team has to do the work at the end of the day. Yeah,
That's back to that word responsibility, really.
exactly.
And I think we in the institute we talk a lot about leadership being everywhere. Everybody in the
Mhm.
organization has the not just the capacity or capability for leadership.
Yeah.
Actually, all of us are leading in some
Mhm.
way at some point within
Yeah.
that context. All of us are also, although this is hard for some leaders to grasp, followers at some
Mhm.
time. Um, is it possible to, uh, I'll use this word train again, to teach, to help people become effective followers?
I would say to be a good leader, it's a prerequisite to be a
Mm.
good follower. Uh,
Okay.
but again, if let's say if we suddenly had a program about followership, how
Mhm.
many people do you think would sign up?
Yeah, fewer, I would
Yeah,
think.
because it's not a very sexy thing to say, oh, I'm a
Mhm.
great follower. However, every leader is a follower, and every
Mhm.
follower is a leader of somebody else.
Uh-huh.
So yes, it's again one of those things of, how am I thinking about that? Mm,
It's interesting because those two hats are not necessarily mutually exclusive. As you said, each of
mm,
us needs to be leader and follower at
yeah.
some time. And I remember, I think, was it Ted Turner who founded CNN, allegedly used to have a plaque on his desk that said "Lead, follow, or get out of the way."
There
And
you
and
go.
and,
Yeah,
and I often think, yeah, there's this. We should be prepared to do all three of those things, maybe at some
absolutely.
time
Yeah,
or other.
I didn't know
Excellent.
about that, but that sounds spot on, actually.
Yeah, I absolutely right. And I know a number of leaders who are unprepared to follow and definitely unprepared to get out of the way, I
Yes.
think.
Yeah.
So one of the other things, just coming back to psychological safety,
Sure.
one of the behaviors that you mention in terms of team behaviors is this idea of social loafing,
Hmm.
which a bit like, some people would think of it as free riding, and
Yeah.
being in the team and benefiting from the team outcome
Yeah.
without actually fulfilling that 1/9 or whatever percentage of the
Yes. Mm.
responsibility it is. Do you think that, or how do you think that teams can encourage every team member to give their contribution, and
Mm.
yet, because that's quite almost directive, and yet still maintain a psychologically safe atmosphere?
Mm.
Because some people might need a bit more push than others to contribute.
Yes. And that again goes back to that psychological safety has nothing to do with having a license to slack off. It's not about that.
Hmm.
Psychological safety is about pressure. Now, your question is very interesting. I actually yesterday had a conversation with a specific organization, and the line manager was telling me that some of his team members, they just not perform.
Yep.
My question is, so what are you doing about that? And he
Yep.
said, well, which meant nothing. And
Yes.
my question was that, okay, so how do you think the other members that actually are putting in the extra mile, how do you
Hmm.
think, what do you think they are assuming about you not doing anything?
Yep.
And he just looked at me, and then he actually realized that he's doing damage to the other members, the ones that are already motivated, because
Yep.
basically he's giving the message that
Yep.
this type of behavior is okay. So,
Right. Yep.
what I'm trying to, the point I'm trying to make with our example is sometimes unintentionally
Mhm.
we contribute to situations like those. So, and for some reason, we tend to focus on those people who do not perform, and
Yep.
we forget about our stars or the ones who don't need us.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
Because the ones who don't perform appear to be needing more attention.
Exactly.
We sort of forget, well, the others will just do it anyway and stuff like this. And interestingly, actually, Richard Gadd, has put up a comment who says in his experience, very few team members are recruited with any consideration for their fit. So as a consequence, teams are disjointed with a high degree of conflict. And actually, two things. One is some of the team members will not perform and will get the attention. The second one is the point that the last point that Richard makes, which is there is minimal incentive or desire to resolve the differences.
That's very true.
Yeah. And the challenge, I guess, for the leader is to try and make sure that those differences are resolved by the team.
And I can't remember who said it, but we should always hire for fit, not for skills. Skills you can always train.
Yep.
But you can't train for the other. I don't know what that means. So
well, there are intangible elements, of course, in the team, which determine the fit. Just thinking, in the last couple of minutes, actually, here, psychological safety. You talk a really nice phrase. That psychological safety is about pressure, actually, and
performance.
Yes, and implicit as well as explicit.
Exactly.
One word we haven't talked about, which is fear. People are often fearful, whether in teams or as in leadership positions of teams, of fearful of inability to do the job, to be seen, to be unable to do the job, etc. Do you think what place is there for fear, if I can use that word, in creating a psychologically safe atmosphere within a team? That's a good question, isn't it?
It is, and I don't know how to approach that one. With the fear, sometimes, there is fear about. So, for example, we have some rules like we shouldn't be criticizing something that the boss has said.
Yeah.
You should not speak up unless you have solid data.
Yes.
You should not speak up if the boss's boss is present. These are some sort of rules that I don't know where they come from, but we sort of all have them in our organization. So there's that type of fear, the fear of losing face. Then there's also something that we all have, which is, it's called the impression management. So within us, we have almost a constant calculator that says, okay, how much shall I disclose? How much shall I keep myself? To what extent should I be managing appearances? Should I be aligned with John right now, or because you are the authority? Should I be aligned with the crowd, with the cultural norm? So again, it's not just one thing. There could be all those elements. And we need to understand where the issue is. And am I making any sense?
You make perfect sense, because the challenge, I guess, is this word fear, which is a hugely negative term, and immediately everybody thinks, oh, fear.
Exactly.
And yet actually, if we allow it to be just a description of different ways to feel, in the way that you described, there are different contexts, the different impressions that we might want to give, that might itself remove the fear in the word fear.
Exactly.
We get more pragmatic about it.
Yes.
Oh, brilliant. Well, Maria, it's very, very clear to me. We could go on for hours and hours with this, and I think we picked up a couple of good comments from the audience, and thank you very much indeed, everybody, for those. And I have to say, we're running out of time now, so that's it. I'd like to thank, obviously, the audience for joining us today. My special thanks to our guest, Maria, and to everybody for listening, and the really, really genuinely fantastic interaction. Been really, really good. Please do join the conversation via social media using the hashtag Leadership at the Edge. For more of our events and lots of other content, visit the website at www.institutelm.com. Maria, thank you very much again.
Thank you, John, and thank you, everybody, for joining us. It was fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for listening.